Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to call upon the moderator and panelists on stage. This evening, we are pleased to have Associate Professor Tan Chee Lei, Deputy Head, Asian Languages and Cultures, National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technological University, as our moderator for this roundtable discussion. I will now hand the time over to Prof. Tan. Prof. Tan, please.
A very good afternoon to Minister Chan Chun Sing, Moss Sun Xueling, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Yes, I hope there are some boys and girls at home watching us, either on Facebook Live or Zoom. Right, let me introduce myself a little. My name is Tan Chee Lei. I'm with NIE NTU. I'm a strong supporter of bilingualism in Singapore. And of course, I've benefited tremendously over the years from the bilingual educational system. It allows me to study and learn and enjoy my life in both the East and the West. I used to study in Taiwan, Chinese language and literature, and Oriental studies in Britain. So enough about myself. Let me introduce my very esteemed panelists. Furthest from my right, we have Mr. Kwek Yew Fund. Mr. Kwek, the current Singapore-based ITE Vice President of International Operations, brings rich knowledge of the expansion of Chinese and other Asian content on the international level. Before his move into the private sector, working in companies such as Yahoo, ICANN, and Netflix, Mr. Kwek held roles as a diplomat, trade negotiator, and policymaker in his career with the Singapore government. Mr. Kwek is now on the Singapore Center for Chinese Language Board. On my right, we have Madam Rahayu Mazam. Madam Rahayu is the Parliamentary Secretary of the Ministry of Communications and Information and the Ministry of Health. Oh, I was just told that we can remove our mask. Yes. Madam Rahayu is also the MP for Jurong constituency. She's a member of the Malay Language Council and chairperson of the Bulan Bahasa Committee. She contributes to the Malay community by being on the board of Mendaki and taking an advisory role in the Malay Heritage Foundation. She's also the advisor to PAYM Central Youth Council and M3 Advisory Council. Both councils focus on working with the youth in Singapore. On my right, we have my old friend, Mr. Arun Mahilnan. Well, we just learned the pronunciation of his name, right?
Thank you.
Mr. Arun is a special research advisor of Institute of Policy Studies. He's a well-known advocate for the preservation and promotion of Tamil language and culture in Singapore. He played an instrumental role in the setup of the digital archives of Singapore Tamil Arts in 2019, and currently serving as the Director for Center for Singapore Tamil Culture and Chairperson for Intercultural Theatre Institute. Mr. Arun aims to promote intercultural understanding in Singapore's multi-ethnic society. Right, so without further ado, we should just dive into our roundtable discussion. Today, we have a very interesting topic, which is actually deep in our heart. We want to talk about bilingualism in Singapore 2030, our vision and way forward. So the program will be like this. There'll be two segments. The first segment will be about our observations of the current situation of bilingualism in Singapore. The second segment will be our vision about the future of bilingualism in Singapore in 2030. All right? So, without further ado, let me invite Mr. Kwek Yew Fund to give your speech in 5 minutes, please.
是，大家下午好，我是郭佑全。然后今天其实真的很感激，也很荣幸能够参加那么有意义的一个活动。 My name is Quack, and I'm really very privileged to be on the panel today sharing a very personal experience. And I think this personal experience is relevant because I am a true beneficiary of the bilingualism policy that Singapore has persisted on. And as a parent of 3 children, one of whom just collected PSLE results this morning, I'm passing the baton on to the next generation as well. So maybe I can start off by talking about my personal experience. I have parents who were English educated and they were Teochew. So at home, we spoke English, speak English and Teochew. So when you enter the school classroom, having a Mandarin delivered class isn't necessarily the most natural thing if you think about the context that the family provides. But for me, the education was very, very important. Because the education that I had in school wasn't just about the delivery of the use of the language, but it also came together with heroes and role models from my culture that I could relate to. It also came together with the kind of values that stemmed from within the culture that made it to be part of the curriculum. And for that, I think it shaped a lot of the kind of identity formation in me, the cultural values. And so it is only in adulthood that I think I begin to understand that this isn't by coincidence, it is really by very careful construct. It is by very thoughtful curation and subsequently also engineering as part of an architecture and something that is really very thought about and requires a lot of work and persistence in terms of execution. And I see this even more now, as you mentioned, in the board role with the SCCL. I think what really became a turning point for me is when this kind of bilingual education was challenged in a real-world environment. Like Prof, I had the privilege of studying overseas, doing my undergraduate in Beijing and China, as well as postgrad in the US. And really, someone from this beautiful island state venturing abroad and really making sure that when you're in a classroom with your counterparts from all over China, I was in Beijing University, Beida, with your counterparts from all over China, and that educational foundation allows you to converse, engage, be part, and in all honesty, to also compete in the Chinese language. This is something that I'm very grateful that I was ready with the kind of educational tools that the Singapore education system gave me. And subsequently, to go to US to also partake in a very different environment. Frankly, the same parameters, but just in a different language and cultural context. And subsequently, in my career opportunities that came about, whether it is working for Silicon Valley companies or working for Chinese tech and entertainment, I think I'm a true beneficiary of the system, and I think it is only fair that I pass the favor forward or help in whichever humble way I can to make sure that this continues to be something that is what Singapore is known for, that, you know, coming from a multilingual, multicultural environment, we can come in and interact and still maintain that personal identity that will serve us well. Now, moving a little bit ahead, as a parent of children, passing the baton is not as easy as it might sound. I assume that with my bilingual environment, I will have children who find this kind of education very easy. But I have 3 children, and all 3 are very unique individuals. All of them are very different. And I think for me right now is making sure that I also pass on the benefits that I have. Some things they understand, some things they might not entirely understand. But making sure that we persist and also making sure that they understand the values that come along with it. So for example, with my son who collected his PSLE results today, my message to him is very, very simple. The results are secondary. The important thing is that as you know, as a family unit, and we support you in your education, we are really passing you the right values as you embark just this one of many, many challenges that are going to come your way. So I don't know if I've gone beyond the 5 minutes that was allocated to me, but this is a personal sharing on my part.
Thank you very much, Mr. Quek, for your very personal sharing. Maybe I can start the ball rolling by some response. You're actually from an English-speaking family, or even some dialect-speaking family, but you went on to study in Beida, and now you are even working in iQIYI, a very Chinese company. Is there a turning point in your journey of education whereby, you know that maybe Chinese is such an interesting subject, you decided, I can actually have where is the turning point, actually? Do you have that?
I have to confess that I became a true convert through popular culture. So through pop music, I really started getting more of a personal interest that went beyond the curriculum. And also, it's very interesting because I think the language opens up not only to new material, but also a new worldview. If you look at pop music, for example, between cultures, and you just compare how lyrics are being written, it really expresses a completely different perspective on how relationships extend that just go beyond just the words. So to confess, that's a turning point, but also an understanding that the curriculum that the classroom delivers to you is one thing. You need to meet the curriculum in the middle by having a personal interest and also a personal adaptability to make use of the tools that have been given to you. For me, that's my takeaway.
All right. Any response from our panelists?
I'm very heartened to see that you are passing the baton. I feel that there are very few of enlightened parents out there. I think it's very important that we spread that spirit to actually encourage our young ones to speak in mother tongue.
Right. Arun? Okay. Right. Shall we invite Madam Rahayu to speak next? Madam Rahayu have worked a lot with the community, with the youth. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Selamat petang, salam sejahtera kepada hadirin yang berada di Dewan ini dan juga yang mengikuti siaran ini melalui dalam talian. Saya gembira dapat hadir dalam sesi untuk membincangkan satu isu yang amat penting bagi masyarakat kita, iaitu kedwibahasaan. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a great privilege to be here amongst so many language experts, also educators, to discuss a very important topic to me. I would say that I suppose the very little authority I have to be here in this platform is because of the fact that I work very closely with the community, especially the Malay community, in advocating the use of the language and the culture. I guess what I want to share is I get the realistic perspective and the challenges we face as a community, the concerns of parents, the challenges youth face in actually using the language. These are some of the experiences that I have gathered over time in working with the community. So one, I think, is an issue of motivation and priorities. Really, we are such a practical community that at the end of the day, it's all sometimes about the results. It's about the wanting to make sure that our young ones pay enough time, pay enough attention and give enough time to subjects that matter so that they do well. And this on occasion causes the mother tongue language to take a back seat. So that's one, I think, concern. But I think more and more now, parents are becoming like yourself, becoming a bit more enlightened and also realize the value of that identity as a Singaporean in getting connected to the culture. And also realize the importance and the value at the economic sense. With Chinese, for example, being able to then communicate with others in the region. With Tamil, Malay clearly is a language of importance, being in the Nusantara. So I think there's a lot more awareness of that now. But aside from the motivation and priorities, we also have challenges of the capabilities and skills of parents to be able to encourage this use of both English and the mother tongue language, to be able to effectively be bilingual. Because I think there's a great sense of or we can only kind of have capacity or have capability for one language. And I think this is something we need to really appreciate and try and give the necessary skills and support to develop. The other aspect really is opportunities in terms of the usage of the language. You know, our children nowadays, I mean, even with us at work, wherever we go, we speak the English language. Gone were the days where we would kind of go back to our mother tongue. So I think looking for these opportunities are very, very important. So I think these are some realities on the ground that we have to appreciate. That means we have to think about the approaches we take. Because if we go with an approach that is without a realization of some of the real challenges, it might be difficult. So for example, when I'm working with the community in doing the Malay language month, which is actually over 3 months, and we do a lot of activities beyond that. The challenge is to sometimes perhaps move from the purist approach of having everything in a certain language, in a certain form, and appreciate that to have people love and be comfortable, we have to maybe lower the standards a bit or really understand and appreciate some of the challenges and skill them up so that they can also join this journey. Create and ignite that love. So these, I think, are some of the issues that we need to face head on. I think there was a bit of a buzz within the Malay community when the census 2020 results came out because there was a comparison of how it was in 2010. I think in 82.7% were using the Malay language as the language at home in 2010. 10 years later, fast forward, it went down to 60.7%, and I think people got a bit worried. But when we looked at the numbers deeper, we saw that the 39% or so who were not using the Malay language as the first language were using the Malay language as the second, next most used language. 93% or so were using it as the next most language. So most of them were actually effectively bilingual. They were using English, but they were also using Malay. So I think there are pockets of hope in this whole effort and journey. For the Malay community at least, it is still a very relevant, something that we use quite often at home. And secondly, I think there's a whole community of partners out there, especially when we work with the Malay Language Month. A lot of people who are advocates, who love the language and culture, stepping up to come up with activities, to come up with solutions, to encourage these sentiments of being bilingual and its values, and thinking up of all sorts of solutions to this issue. So I think there's a lot of hope, and I'm very heartened and excited of the possibilities. And I hope, I guess, with opportunities of platforms like this, hearing from others and sharing the different experiences, we'll be able to come up with more solutions and realistic and practical results, efforts that could help our community move towards this vision of a bilingual community.
Thank you. Some responses from our panelists?
Thank you. Historically, if you look at the language loss of the three major ethnic communities, I think the Indians gave up their mother tongue earlier than others. In the case of the Chinese, the story is a bit more complex because most of them were not speaking Mandarin, they were speaking dialects. Mm-hmm. And they had to give up the dialects because of government policy. But in the case of the Malays, as a Tamil, as an Indian, I have been observing and I've been sharing with a lot of people, look at the Malay community, they never give up their language. But in the last 20 years, the census shows an inexorable loss. Chinese, Malays, and Indians. And I wonder whether the Malay decline is following the same pattern as the Indians and the Chinese, or is it a different story? Because by the time this happened, especially in the last 20 years, our bilingualism policy has been well established. And the benefits of this has also been, when I started out, which I'm going to talk about, this wasn't the case, because I'm much older than all of you here. So what is it that is causing this loss of, or decline, no, I won't say loss, decline of home usage? Is it simply because all the parents are also English educated and they find it easier to communicate? Or is it something larger, that they don't really feel strongly about the Malay identity as part of the language, as part of the Malay identity? Thank you.
I would just venture some opinions on this. I guess when we talked about the efforts in encouraging bilingualism, well, in the past, it was really getting us to kind of step up our use of the English language, because most people are most comfortable in their mother tongues, right? But now the effort has shifted because English has become something that's become so prominent and also very important, because it's the business language, is the language that one must have to do well in school, to do well in work, and socialize. So I think there is that competing sort of interest, I suppose. I am really quite interested in your sort of theory or hypothesis that it follows a different pattern for the Malay community, and I think so too, because I would have to say that I think because what is the rallying call and what is most what do you call this, basic sort of intrinsic connection to the culture is very deep within the Malay community in that sense. So we're a community which loves our culture, our decorum, our language, and it's quite tied into that. And so I think perhaps because it plays such a large part within our community, it stays very nascent and very real within our community. But then we face other issues as well in terms of the manifestation of the language. How do we make it like baku, sebutan baku, bahasa baku? And so we have other sort of, I guess, challenges and issues we have to deal with. But as a matter of observation, I think I would agree that perhaps as compared to other races, just based on my observation of the work that I do, it does appear that we are following a little bit of, it is a decline, it is as with all, but there is still that strong sense for the language and culture. I think this decline is very much as a result of the use of English as being the most important language in our day-to-day interactions, I would say that. And so there's that competing sort of ability to be available and be the language of use for the people. And I think that's a reality we have to accept and try and overcome.
Right. Mr. Quek? Okay, thank you very much. Right now, we are moving on to Mr. Arun. Your take on the current situation. Maybe a little bit about your own personal experience as well, right?
Mikka Nandri. That is to say, thank you very much in Tamil. Since the chairman asked me to start with my personal experience, and I think it has some bearing. You see, I started my secondary school education in 1959, and as all of you know, this is one of the most historical turning points in our history. We attained self-government, and we also had the PAP government as the government of the day. And at that time, certainly there was a sense in many educated or aspiring Indian community homes that if you want to go up the ladder, you have to master English. And they also felt that if you want to specialize in English, you won't have time to read, study Tamil and improve your language. I don't know why this is so, but it was certainly widespread, which is why if you look at those Indians, Tamils in their 60s, 70s, I'm 76 by the way, you will find most of them are not capable of holding even a simple conversation in Tamil, but they're very high up. Now, in my case, I do cherish my language, and I also actually went to the University of Malaya in Kuala Lumpur on a government bursary to study Tamil literature and then come back and take over the headship of the NIE, what was then called the Teachers Training College, Tamil Division. But as luck would have it, by the time I returned with my degree, the intake had actually dropped. So they told me I could do any other job. The government gave me a number of options. I chose to go into broadcasting, but there I made a very critical decision that I will only do English broadcasting and not Tamil, which I had already been doing for 10 years as a part-timer. So for the past 50 years, I have been working in jobs where Tamil has never been part of it. Professionally, I hardly ever used Tamil. And yet after 50 years, I can speak Tamil well. I can read. I actually read. I'm keeping up with the best of Tamil novels and poetry. I can even read a speech well in Tamil. Why is this so, And I think there are a number of reasons. I just want to offer 4 specific reasons. First and foremost of all, it's my home language. My siblings, my parents, we spoke in Tamil. Even though we could speak in English, we made it a point. Actually, it was not even a very deliberate, it came naturally. That's one. The second point is, again, in the early part of our history, because of the urge to build a new national identity, some leaders felt we should forget about Chineseness, forget about Malayness, forget about Indianness. And the assumption was that it's a kind of zero-sum game. In order to gain one, you have to give up the other. Well, my family and I did not subscribe to this idea. We were quite convinced that this is not a zero-sum game. You don't have to give up. And also, by the way, our ethnic cultures are not some minor tribal cultures that you can forget or give up easily. Each one, Chinese, Malay, Islamic civilization, Chinese civilization, Indian civilization. These are civilization cultures, so why would we give up? So my family decided, no, we will not give up our culture, but we will also become Singaporean, which is what we are all trying to become. So I would say that because of this conscious decision to not give up our Indianness and Tamilness, my family and all the siblings, we are all in different professions, but we are all equally comfortable, and we have a facility in both languages. So that's a second thing, a conscious decision. The third one is perhaps at a personal level very difficult. Unlike English, where we are immersed in the English bath, there is no bath for Tamil in the public domain. We have to make a persistent, consistent, and conscientious effort to keep up with our language, because we are a tiny minority. We're less than 5%, all right? So there is a personal effort that is required. And finally, I want to point out most gratefully for the multilingualism policy and the bilingualism policy that the Lee Kuan Yew government established. They laid the foundation. And if not for that political will and a national platform, I don't think Tamil would have survived. So I would say that this policy decision is a critical part of the survival, and I hope it will flourish for a long time to come. Perhaps just... Okay, let me just add something that goes beyond my personal thing and also the community thing. And I think many of you here, as well as those who are watching this online, may not realize this, that the Tamil's position in Singapore has had a global impact. I'm talking about the Tamil diaspora. Because of the government's commitment to Tamil as one of the 4 official languages, which, by the way, only in India and in Sri Lanka, Tamil is an official language. Nowhere else in the world, not even in Malaysia. It's a recognized language, but it is not one of the state languages. Singapore is exceptional in that. And I want to give you 2 instances of the impact of Tamil on a global level. First, I want to mention that in 1992, the Singapore Tamil Teachers Union initiated the World Tamil Teachers Conference. World Tamil Teachers Conference, when in In India, in Sri Lanka, and even in Malaysia, they have many times more Tamil schools than we. And today we don't have a Tamil school. And yet, in 1992, we did not have a Tamil school. We have Tamil in many other schools teaching English as a main medium of instruction. Now imagine Singapore leading this effort. And by the way, after some years, the World Secretariat has now been established in Singapore. Many people made this policy, but I want to mention Mr. S. Samikanu, a Tamil teacher and the former president of the Singapore Tamil Teachers Union, was the prime mover for this. So it is amazing that Singapore can lead Tamil teaching for the world. The second example is the Worldwide Tamil Internet Organization also established its first secretariat in 2000 here in Singapore, not in India, which has 1 million times more people with capacity, intellectual, technological capacity. But they said, no, Singapore. Why is this so? Because I think the Tamil diaspora understands that in the case of Singapore, Tamil is not just a lip service. The commitment of the government and fellow citizens, non-Tamil, non-Indian citizens, support for this policy is what makes us stand out in the Tamil diaspora. So I just wanted to share these two examples of how the policy that the government has put in place has enabled us, me, my family, my entire Tamil community, Indian community, to pursue this language. So I can only say thank you to the government, thank you to the fellow citizens of Singapore for making this possible for me and everybody else. Thank you.
Thank you, Arun. It's very heartened to know that actually Singapore can be the hub or even lead in some of these initiatives, being the leader. It reminded me of Singapore being the hub of Chinese publication in Southeast Asia. And we used to be that, and for even like movies, films, soft culture. Any response, please?
Yeah, maybe I would just like to echo Mr. Arun's points, both on the civilizational context and also what that means in a global environment. I think that this bilingualism really helps us forge this Singaporean identity, because when we come together, we understand that we are multifaceted, and also we bring with us a richness and depth and complexity when we are coming to forge this new Singaporean identity, which frankly we're still in the process of evolving and further discovering. So I think that the civilizational point is an interesting one. The other one is also, while this helps us become better Singaporeans, if you may, it also helps us become better global citizens. I think naturally, because we're multicultural and we're smaller, we find it easier to understand the complexity of the world, that maybe India has 22 official languages. When people who come from monolithic cultures, they might be bamboozled by how does one country have 22 official languages and just the official languages? But for Singaporeans, I think it's something that we understand quite easily, that there's a Bollywood, but there's also a Tollywood. There are multiple nexus for entertainment and art and craft. So I think that this kind of insisting on having this kind of competence or even mastery in more than one languages actually make us richer.
Right, I'm aware of time, so we are moving on to the second segment, which is the all-important future. Our panelists will share on their vision for bilingualism in the year 2030. You're free to provide even concrete plans or proposals as to how we can achieve this vision. All right, may I invite Mr. Craig first?
Sure. I'm the layman amongst experts in this group, so maybe I'll just paint out two observations for what I think will help us in the future. The first point I'd like to make is really making the language come alive. especially for the next generation, they need to see the mother tongue not as it's just an examinable subject, but something that is alive and something they can have fun with in its own right. I talked a little bit about my personal biases because I got introduced I got my introduction to love with the language because of popular culture. I think this is something that we can celebrate. That, you know, if you're looking at exploring the mother tongue, it can be through films, it can be through TV, it can be through entertainment, it can be through games, and not just have it as, just see it for its utilitarian value. And I think this is one of the reasons why I enjoy my job, because really, streaming technology has allowed us to bring entertainment choices from anywhere around the world to another audience anywhere around the world through the use of any device almost that you have. So I think embrace that, have fun with that, and allow the children to have fun with that. My kids are currently hooked on watching S-pop on Channel 8. I believe it's Channel 8. And you know, it's celebrating Chinese language music making that has come out from Singapore but has found regional resonance. So this is, in terms of the 2 points I'm going to make, the first one is a more fun point. The second point I'm trying to make is maybe something a little bit more serious, which is that we are really sitting on real opportunity here and a real competitive advantage. And this is something that I tell my children as well. Don't squander it. I work in a regional and global environment where I see people try to pursue a second language in adulthood, and I see the kind of sacrifices they have to make, whether it's personal time, whether it's just in terms of the effort they have to put in. There is so much curation and thought in creating a bilingual environment, if not a multilingual environment for our children. This is something that shouldn't be squandered. This is something that should be celebrated. And personally, you know, like just understanding how having that little basic bahasa, for example, can open doors in Malaysia and Indonesia. Just that little bit of bahasa can help you so much. I think it's something that we should continue celebrating. So if I were to think about maybe not something as grandiose as a vision for 2030, but as a layman and thinking about how we can pass things forward, one is really have fun with it. And on the serious side of things, you know, don't squander this opportunity that has been so carefully cultivated for the generation.
Right, thank you very much. Talk about S-pop, talk about streaming, which we're actually spending a lot more time now.
Thank you for your business.
Are you working from home or are you actually watching from home? Yes, and you talk about even learning other languages beyond your own mother tongue, which I think is excellent. Embrace of diversity, right? Any other response from our panelists?
I'll share a couple of thoughts.
Okay, you keep it for later. All right, maybe we can invite Madam Rahayu first for your vision and even proposal for our bilingualism in the year 2030.
I think my vision is really to see the strength in numbers and, you know, the number of converted who really embrace this vision that we have, how we see how valuable it is to be bilingual. I hope more in the community accept this as a fact and that we will work towards achieving this for future generations. I think in terms of the steps we need to take, I feel that we're a step in the right direction. We're taking all the necessary moves, and it has to be something that is a multi-pronged approach. I think at the highest level of the government, I mean, the fact that we have this fund and the policies that we have in place in our education system are so important. Like Mr. Arun mentioned about how, you know, that conscious effort at the personal level as well as at the policy level to have to make sure that this exists for our community. And I believe that we also need to make sure that we involve the community. We already have advocates. Some come in the form of individuals like Mr. Yu Chuang, Mr. Kwek. Some are active groups, activists. Some are educators, and we have them in our midst. We have wonderful language teachers who are very passionate. And I think we can harness this energy to actually help us in this effort moving forward. I feel that we also should really think about how we can have a tiered approach to people who are at different levels of, acceptance of this vision. Because of the realities, and I mentioned earlier about the realities of the life we have, how fast-paced, the competing interests of other subjects, other interests. These are real things that we need to acknowledge. And different people are at different spaces, different sort of levels of appreciation and language and understanding of different capabilities. And I think we need to have more curated and targeted efforts. So for the likes of you who like pop culture and music, we should tailor some of those interesting bits for you. For perhaps people who are already advocates, we should unskill them to kind of reach out. And I think this tiered approach is actually very important within the community. I also feel that perhaps one thing we could really look at is tracking our sort of capabilities and how close we are in getting there. I think we do a lot of programs, but whether we're actually really moving the needle with regards to this is something I think we need to further look into. I guess I'm saying this because, I do the Bulan Bahasa event every year for a couple of years now. I think a couple of years back, someone wrote in the paper, and it still resonates with me now, and it's a challenge I still want to really meet. She said, you do this year in and year out. How do you know that people are actually, getting better at the language or actually embracing bilingualism? How do you know that your campaigns work? And I think that's a very fair question. We pour in a lot of resources to this. How do we know that they're effective? So I think tracking is an important thing. Also, in terms of actually being more evidence-based in understanding the behavioral insights of the community, what clicks with them, what's going to be most salient to them, what will move them. I think these are things we probably need to channel our efforts into. So I feel there's a lot of work cut out for us, and really, I think this is something I'm looking forward to and very happy to be in this journey with, in the midst of many very wonderful people here.
Right. Response from a panelist?
Sure. Maybe I'll just jump in to agree with the tiered approach that Madam Rahayu was talking about, because I think it's really grounded on pragmatism. Every child is unique. Every household is unique as well. So I think it's easy sometimes to get excited based on one data figure or one statistical point. And if it sparks conversation for self-reflection, further discussion, then I think it's very, very healthy. But maybe don't let that number mask the fact that there's a lot of diversity beneath that number, and really a tiered approach towards to acknowledge the kind of variances that we see in the different conditions is a very pragmatic one.
Okay, right. Now we back to Arun. Your vision, and
Thank
even
you.
if possible,
Yeah.
provide some plans and
Okay.
proposals.
Thank you, Chee. I'm not very big on this vision thing. I'm a very pragmatic fellow. But anyway, let me just start off by saying we need to have a very clear understanding of the idea and the purpose of bilingualism. I mean, we heard the PM, we heard Minister Chan outline some of the fundamentals, the reasons why the government had put forward these policies, and they have been consistent, they have been pushing for it. But sometimes, the way it comes out is one of the very common refrain I hear about is, you must learn the other language because it has economic value. Now, in the case of Mandarin, it makes some eminent sense, I would say. Look at 1.4 billion people in China. It has one language as a national language. And yes, our Mandarin could probably get us there and make a few doors open. But this is less so for Malay and much, much less so for Tamil. And as Mr. Quek pointed out, in India, they have 24 official languages and another 2,000 languages. So it is not Tamil is going to open the big doors in India. And I can tell you as a Tamil who has visited Chennai many times, actually you get better service when you speak English than in Tamil. That's the state of Tamil in India. I don't think this economic argument is a valid argument for Tamil at all. And this has to be fully understood. It has very little economic value. So do we just give up because there's no economic value? In fact, people have asked me, I have never made a living out of Tamil, but why the hell am I so passionate about this language? For one reason only. My identity is it's an integral, my Tamil language is an integral part of my identity. And I think this personal and communal identity and cultural identity should be the primary reason why we are learning our mother tongue. All right, so that's one very important. We cannot lose sight of it. Because if I don't put forward this cultural identity, most of the Tamils will have no rational reason to pay attention to this, because there's very little economic value. There is some, very little. That's not a convincing argument. The second thing is, I really believe that each language, and not just our mother tongues, any other language, which I'll come back to later about the idea of bilingualism, whether it should be bilingualism or multilingualism, each language is a key to another world. A very different world, but a very rich world, you know. And I can tell you from my personal experience, even though the jobs I have done have never required Tamil, but in each of the jobs I did, I actually used the knowledge, the insights I've acquired from Tamil sources. By the way, I mean, Tamil, that grammar book for Tamil is 2,000 years old. Imagine that. And our epics are second to none in English. So why in the world would I give up such a wonderful, great language and literature just because I want to master English? I'm not too bad with my English, you know. I've done a decent job. So this is what I'm very concerned about, that a number of young people still have that very old idea. It's a zero-sum game. If you want to be good in English, you can't be good in Tamil. And I think all of us sitting on this stage are right now demonstrating that we don't have to give up our mother tongue just in order to make ourselves intelligible in English. Now, looking to the future, I think it's a little unfortunate that our bilingualism, certainly in the case of Tamil, had long been exam-smart bilingualism. And I think it should move to lived bilingualism. In the case of Tamil, you know, about 30, 40 years ago, or even about 20 years ago, you'll find a number of fellows scoring A in the exam. They come out of the school system, they can't speak to save their lives. Or if they spoke, they will be speaking in a very stilted, formal variety of Tamil. But it has changed. Now it is the government, I mean, the MOE has paid a lot of attention to spoken Tamil, and they've improved a lot, and it shows. You just look at the Tamil media, radio and television, there's so many young people speaking absolutely beautiful Tamil. So I'm very glad it is improving, but we have a long way to go, you know. But I think the critical problem is this practice of bilingualism, practice of mother tongue. There are two principal sources. One, the parents, the other one are the teachers. We often put the pressure on teachers, but as a parent, what do we do? I mean, you just related your own experience. So I think parents have a tremendously important role, especially the smaller the community, the more you have to put in, because otherwise it will disappear very, very quickly. So I would appeal to the parents to pay more attention to this. I would also like to share something which is perhaps a bit unusual. In the case of Tamil, the government is putting out so much Tamil content that in comparison with even Malaysia, where Tamil is a recognized language, it is a fantastic amount of Tamil. Tamil Nadu government does, Sri Lankan government puts out Tamil, but because of our 4-language policy, all the government messages are usually translated into 4, almost most of them. Then even institutions like HDB, CPF, they all send out messages in Tamil, all right? So my view is that in a very unusual way, the Singapore government is generating Tamil content that is so related to daily life. Because most of the language teaching, I mean, I don't know much about Chinese or Malay, but I certainly know how Tamil is taught. I think there is this fantastic resource of Tamil content generated by or initiated by government, some of it translated by the government itself, and some of it the media is obliged to translate. I mean, I just want to show you something. This is
Your mic.
today's Tamil Murasu, okay? Of the 10 pages, the first 5 pages are either government messages or government advertisements. 5 pages of Tamil content initiated by the government. This is not the case, from what Chee mentioned, not necessarily in the Chinese press. In Tamil media, a lot of Tamil being disseminated is actually government messages and government-initiated messages. But these messages are not something esoteric. This is what our children, our adults, live with on a daily basis. So I have been trying to alert, or well, maybe it is being done in the name of current affairs. But I think we can actually use Tamil generated by the government as a new and a deep resource for socializing our students, because they can immediately see the translation side by side. And as you know, Tamil Murasu is online. So literally, they can open up 2 pages and see that government COVID, in the period of COVID, there have been so many new words that have been translated and come into circulation, daily usage. So I really feel that this is an opportunity that the Tamil teaching community, as well as parents, you see, like at home, you can just show the straight stamps and the Tamil Murasu and say, this is how it is translated. So the students are exposed to real life learning, not some textbook thing that you have to go and see. So I do feel there are a number of opportunities for Tamil that are there. I hope our teaching community are using it, but I know a lot of parents are not doing this because they feel this is not their job, but this is a wonderful opportunity, yeah.
Thank you, Arun. I think you're spot on when you say we should really move from exam-smart bilingualism to real-life bilingualism. As this ties in very well with what Mr. Kwek has said, make language come alive. And what Madam Rahayu said, the greater use of mother tongue Malay in Malay families. And when you use Tamil Murasu as reference, I think it's actually, I immediately think that, well, in our schools now, actually, we are using a lot of authentic materials for the mother tongue. And I think this is the way to go, to make it a living language. Because, for example, this is today's paper.
Yeah.
You can immediately use it in today's lessons. And you mentioned we have letters coming in 4 languages from CPF, HDB, and so on. In fact, I actually use them in my classes.
Okay.
As authentic materials, as for translations, for understanding our policy.
Right. If I could just add one more thing about bilingualism, This may sound a bit controversial, but I honestly think it is worth considering. Because of the word bilingualism, we are locked into this Chinese, Mandarin English, Malay English, Tamil English. I don't think it should be confined to just two. We should actually move on to interlingualism in Singapore, because all four languages are official languages. All four languages are widely used in the public domain. And why not cross these boundaries and, build bridges among all four languages? By the way, Dr. Tan is the head of the Chinese advisory panel in NLB, and I happen to be the chairman of the Tamil advisory panel in NLB. And we have gotten together with the Malay advisory panel as well. And we are now trying to get NLB to organize programs, not just Chinese English, but Chinese, Malay, Tamil, and English. Why not? It's not something that we should always say only bilingual. So I make an appeal to make it multilingual, and I hope we'll see more of that. There's one other, and also, by the way, in the national, nowadays called the Singapore Book Council, again, Dr. Tan and I are involved in this. We're trying to create an award scheme for translations. Now, without translation, we cannot build the bridges. So the translation is a vitally important point. So I hope each of the language promoters will also think in terms of not just crossing over to mother tongue, but actually crossing over to all mother tongues, that we are all in this together. So, I think I would really like to see a truly interlingual, multilingual Singapore rather than just a bilingual Singapore.
I thought the proposal for translation prize is still a secret. You have spilled a bit.
Oh, okay.
But you heard it first now.
Yeah, okay.
We're trying to advocate.
I mean, it's in an embryonic stage. It's just being discussed. There's no commitment yet. But it is something that we really feel very strongly that it should be done. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm aware of time. Any quick responses?
I guess one thing that really impacted me from Mr. Arun's sharing was really how we really need to consider different treatments and different approaches for the different languages, because clearly the experience and challenges faced by the community speaking in Tamil is different from that of that community speaking in Malay and Chinese. And I think as we go further, deepening these efforts in creating bilingualism, or even extending it to different languages, we really need to understand that community that uses the language and see what really moves them, what's resonating with them. And I think I think it was a very insightful sharing of the challenges the Tamil community faces in terms of preserving and actually calling out for that motivation in using that language. So I thought that was just something that's useful for us, I think, moving forward as well, in understanding what are the different approaches we can take for the different languages. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Right now, we need to move on to our final segment, which is the question and answer. We do have a number of questions already. The first one, which has 13 votes, actually, is this. What can be done to leverage the power of social media to improve the attitude and mindset towards mother tongue language usage and encourage the use of mother tongue language? This is about social media. So, Mr. Quek.
Maybe I'll just chime in with some ideas, and not to be partial to any particular platform or be advocates, but it might be fun to do a TikTok challenge that involved multi-language environments, whether there is maybe classical Tamil poetry, but in a TikTok challenge, you are looking at participants coming up with fun ideas for it. I think this is an excellent example of how it can be more engaging with a younger demographic and also make it fun and come alive. I think it's a great idea. I'm sure, and maybe I'll bring this back to SCCL as well. I'm sure our colleagues from the fund could be looking into this as well.
Right.
Okay, I'm very glad this question came up because it is more than social media. There are lots of new technologies that have enabled the teaching of languages around the world. And I can see in Singapore the fact that we have all these new technologies, which, including the social media, has actually had an impact on the usage of Tamil among the younger people. I have never seen so much of creative expression in Tamil by the younger generation as we see now in the last 5 years or so. So social media gives the opportunity, it's a liberating media, but as we all know, in fact, yesterday in another IPS conference, Minister Lawrence Wong had to address this. Social media is a boon as well as a bane. There are lots of bad things, but I would say social media is a wonderful opportunity. And the new technology is not just social, there are games, there are apps, there are websites, there are emails, there are all kinds of things that we can use, and we should really, and unfortunately, many of the Tamil teachers are a little behind the younger students. I'm sure this is not just peculiar to Tamil. Our children have taken to the new technologies like duck to water, so they are very, very fond of. And I hope we will make the best use of this. And fortunately, Tamil is keeping up with the technology. You see, for Malay, you don't have a problem because you're basically using English, Romanized Malay, right? For Tamil, there has been a lot of issues about fonts and things like that, but they are minor problems. They're really not a big issue. So we can use it, and I'm glad to see the usage, and I would say more. Thank you.
Maybe I would like to add a little from my own experience as a teacher, as a father. Using of social media is just an excellent tool right now, I think. I use it with my daughters. I use it with my students at school, using Facebook, creating certain groups, for example, for my creative writing class, for my Chinese curriculum, and for my kids. When I read something interesting in Chinese, in Mandarin, I will just send it to them immediately. And just to remind yourself that even on social media, although it may be more convenient to use English on social media, but then I try to keep my language of interaction to be Chinese, even on social media. I think there's something, this is a conscious effort. If you want them to use that language, you have to use it yourself first. So not only pushing the materials in the mother tongue, you have to use mother tongue to converse with them, even on social media. I thought that's an idea. Okay? Right, we have another question with 7 votes. As society becomes more diverse, do we need more mother tongue language materials to be translated into English so that people who do not speak mother tongue can understand their culture better?
Thank you. Because I'm very, my heart is close to this idea of translation. I don't think we should continue to think always English language, as I mentioned earlier. By the way, some of you may not remember this. The government supported an initiative of a multilingual literary magazine called Singer many years ago with Professor Edwin Tambu as the chief editor, and I was one of the editors. The idea then was not only translation into English, but translation into other languages simultaneously. A Malay pantun will be translated into English, into Mandarin, and Tamil. This is many decades ago, I think that is the right direction, that we always we are overprivileging English as if it is the only way we can communicate. Yes, it is our common language, but there is no reason to confine our interactions to English or through English. And I think we should encourage more multiple language translations.
Yes, and I immediately think about the One Story project of
Yes,
NLB,
in NLB, yeah.
whereby a language, a story is being translated to 3 other languages, right?
Maybe if I could just address them from another perspective, I guess one view could be that if you do a translation to English, which is the language most commonly used, the person may then have a crutch, because then you're not really, like how we sometimes do this with parents, right? One parent will just speak in the mother tongue and one parent will just speak in English, so that you want to ensure that the child actually develops that resilience and capability of actually speaking in that language. So I guess there may be some concerns of that if we just do immediate translations all the time. But I think as a practical approach, that is something we should consider and I think be open to. I mentioned earlier about the tiered approach. I think it is about accepting the reality that for some groups it is a challenge, and if we don't provide that alternative and that step forward to them, it might be a bit challenging. So I think this is something we should be open to and consider. But I'm really quite excited to see multi-language translations so that we can really, as you said earlier, Mr. Arun, delve into another culture, because the language is really just a way for us to appreciate another culture. So I just thought for the purposes of this, I think for practical reasons, I think we may want to consider having that aid for the language to then be bridged to those who may not be as comfortable yet, but really figure out a way that's strategic that will actually enable them to then be comfortable with the language and then be able to be effectively bilingual and multilingual.
May I just add one more point? Earlier you had asked me for some specific ideas, and I thought, what can I suggest? And I had actually put down here, that we should have a directory of translated novels or creative works, We don't have, even in NLB, the way the books are shelved is the Tamil language shelves, the Chinese language shelves, and so on and so forth. But we are now trying to bring in other languages. If there is a great epic in one language and they are translated in the other 3 languages, we are trying to physically bring them together so when the browser looks at this, oh my God, this is also available in Malay and Chinese. So I think we need to have this idea that we have to have translations and all for. Maybe the Bilingualism Fund can support an idea of a directory of all Singapore creative writings in all 4 languages. Whichever book has been, just one story is just one example, yes. But there are many other things we can do. Likewise, I was a bit facetious, but I thought maybe we can create a directory of 500 words that are most commonly used in Singapore in all 4 languages, the translation in all 4 languages. Of course, the most wonderful word is kiasu. We use that. What does it mean in Tamil, in Malay, and likewise Majula? We can put abeng, These are words we use so commonly, but we don't really have a translation of these words in our own mother tongue. So we can do, there are a number of things we can do as far as translation is concerned. Yeah. Thank you.
Our time is almost up. Maybe can I invite our panelists to just, in one line, talk a little bit about today's theme. What do you want to say? The final words.
I'm happy to kick off. Maybe I would say celebrate and continue the good fight.
I need a little bit more than that. I think I want to wrap up with the theme that we have for Bulan Bahasa, which is Cita, Citra, Cinta. Cita is aspiration, what we hope for the future, and I think that's what we are here today. We want a future where people are embracing bilingualism. Citra is the diversity, the expression, and I think that's something that we need to embrace and really understand of our community so we can do things better. And Cinta, above all, It's the language, it's the love for our culture and our importance to tie into our identity. That's very important that I think we need to spread and send that message to people around us.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to say, as a minority among minorities, I am utterly grateful that the government has made Tamil as an official language. And that has really made a huge difference to the Tamil community as well as Indian community, because at least there's one Indian language that has become the official language. And of course, it is the language of the vast majority of Indians here. So I would say thank you, but it is up to the Indian community to make sure that we take every effort to keep this language alive. And of course, I thank you for you and the organizers for giving me a chance to be in the company of great interlocutors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe my final words. We always think that bilingualism is the cornerstone of our educational system. When we talk about cornerstones, I always think of it as the four corners. So today, I really think that the four corners are the four languages. We really want to keep them, and hopefully they will continue to be strong and hold our educational system. All right, thank you. With this, I thank everybody physically here, as well as all the viewers on Facebook Live, on Zoom. Thank you very much. A very enjoyable session with all our esteemed panelists. Thank you.